You are currently positioned at a monumental doorway. This isn't merely a figure of speech or a poetic phrase meant to stir up emotions. In this exact second, as you process these sentences, a fundamental part of your awareness has stepped over an invisible boundary, and there is no turning back. This portal didn't unlock just because you hit play on a video. It unlatched much earlier. It swung wide in those silent, solitary moments, when your inner self rejected the outdated narrative you've been living. It happened when you observed your current existence, the mask you've worn for others, the predictable persona people relied upon, and an ancient, profound part of your soul whispered a permanent, quiet truth. There is more than this. That realization wasn't a mental breakdown. It was the doorway revealing itself. Stumbling upon this message today isn't a random accident or a clever computer algorithm. It is vibrational alignment. This entrance only materializes for individuals broadcasting a wavelength compatible with what lies on the other side. Lately, you've been emitting a highly distinct resonance, haven't you? It's the vibration of a person caught in the middle. You are suspended between your past self and your future evolution, wedged between an outgrown existence and the vibrant reality fighting to break through. You are navigating a transitional hallway. That hallway is the threshold. Consider all your recent emotions, the bizarre confusion, the profound sorrow without a target, the blend of sheer panic and thrill, and that nagging intuition that a massive shift is brewing right under the mundane surface of your daily routine. These are the exact symptoms of lingering at a quantum crossing point, bridging two distinct dimensions of reality. This guide is designed to escort you directly through this passage. We aren't going to bypass it or fly over it. We are going straight in. Once we reach the opposite side together, you'll have complete clarity on your recent experiences. You'll grasp the inner workings of spiritual evolution, why awareness rarely shifts in slow, creeping steps, but rather leaps across boundaries in sudden, permanent flashes. You will finally see that your inner turmoil isn't a symptom of failure. Rather, it is the sharpest indicator that things are aligning perfectly and permanently. You will also realize that taking the final step forward is far less perilous than remaining paralyzed at the precipice. The portal is currently ajar, but it won't wait forever. Let us dive in. Just before a massive transformation occurs, a specific phenomenon takes place. Science outlines it with incredible accuracy, yet humanity tends to feel it as a psychological breakdown. Using quantum physics as an analogy, when a system exists in superposition, holding several potential states at the exact same time, it never morphs slowly from one phase to the next. Instead, it hangs in a tense balance of infinite potential. It juggles every outcome until a critical tipping point forces a collapse. In a single heartbeat, the tension shatters. The superposition terminates. A singular, concrete reality hardens out of the vast sea of possibilities, permanently erasing the others. This change isn't leisurely or drawn out. It is an abrupt, boundary-crossing event. A system goes from being everywhere at once to being entirely localized in a flash. Therefore, the dizzying sensation you've endured, that feeling of straddling two worlds and realizing your carefully constructed life is too small for your expanding soul, is not mere mental fog. You are experiencing human superposition. You have been actively sustaining contradictory versions of your identity. You are carrying the weight of the person you were alongside the person you are destined to be. The comfortable lie and the raw truth, the theatrical performance of your daily routine, and the genuine existence fighting for breath. Bearing the gravity of these overlapping lives is crushing. It creates a bone-deep fatigue that no amount of rest can cure. It generates a mental maze that rational thought cannot navigate, simply because you cannot intellectualize your way out of a quantum entanglement. The only escape is forward movement. The doorway represents that point of collapse. It is the exact location where the chaotic potential dies, and a single, unified reality solidifies. This transition mimics a severe crisis, not because you are failing, but because collapsing into a vastly superior state demands the total destruction of your former foundations. Your previous persona won't merely step out of the way to accommodate the new you. It must disintegrate entirely. And that process of disintegration, even when dismantling a false self constructed out of societal demands and defense mechanisms rather than genuine purpose, mimics profound loss. It mimics mourning. It feels identical to watching the earth crumble away from beneath your toes. Yet, science reveals a comforting truth that human emotion often hides. The structure doesn't shatter into a void. It collapses into absolute clarity. It narrows down into a highly specific, undeniable reality that represents the purest, most authentic version of what was always there. This shattering isn't your ruin. It is your ultimate arrival. You aren't fading away or losing your essence in this transition. Rather, you are finally becoming visible, perhaps for the first time in years, or maybe for the very first time in your current incarnation. You are solidifying into the distinct, absolute iteration of yourself that was always meant to be. This doorway bridging infinite potential and concrete reality, separating chaotic possibility from your ultimate arrival, that is exactly where your feet are planted today. Let us examine what truly exists on either side of this boundary. A major reason this crossing feels so paralyzing is your brain's survival instinct. To keep you safe, your mind imagines worst-case scenarios about the future, while simultaneously viewing your past through rose-colored glasses. Your former life, your old habits, your past persona, they suddenly seem far more secure in your memory than they ever were in reality. Meanwhile, the uncharted territory ahead, the evolving identity waiting beyond the threshold, appears risky, untested, and shrouded in fog. This dynamic is the very blueprint of hesitation, and it is incredibly effective at trapping individuals at the starting line indefinitely. So, we must strip away the illusions. Let's evaluate both realms without the blinding filters of anxiety and sentimentality. Looking back at the realm you are exiting, you'll see an identity molded entirely by external forces. It was a character designed around societal demands, safety protocols, and what made sense to your peers. You shouldn't view this past self as a failure or a source of shame. It was a brilliant, highly adaptable, and often deeply compassionate shield. It successfully carried you to this exact moment, navigating treacherous landscapes with genuine expertise. However, it was never your complete essence. It was merely the fraction of your soul that learned to censor and translate your inner truth into a dialect the world found acceptable. But translation always demands a toll. Elements always get lost in the process. The quirks that defied convention, the profound intuitions that lacked a logical label, the vast emotional depths that couldn't fit into a mundane routine, all of it was shoved into a box, tightly packed and postponed for someday. Well, someday has arrived. The identity waiting on the opposite side isn't some utopian illusion. You aren't going to magically become a flawless, transcendent being levitating above life's daily struggles. It is far more grounded and authentic than that. It is simply the iteration of you that refuses to waste another drop of energy on that exhausting translation process. It's the you that stops heavily editing your personality to align with a fabricated narrative. It's the version that quits acting in a play and finally begins living an actual existence. You are transitioning from the heavy fatigue of pretending into the pure lucidity of simply being. So, what exactly shifts when you take that step? Not everything alters overnight. Your external environment won't magically morph into a different dimension. The practical logistics of your day-to-day won't disappear and respawn in an upgraded state. Rather, the fundamental vibration from which you interact with reality shifts, and once your core frequency adjusts, the universe restructuring itself around that new pitch is guaranteed. It won't happen instantly like a cinematic montage, but rather consistently and unstoppably, much like a tuning fork forces a nearby guitar string to hum at its exact pitch. Your environment will inevitably begin vibrating in harmony with your newly broadcasted signal, but the leap must come first. You must allow the outdated structure to crumble before the new architecture can take shape. This is the sole demand of the threshold. It doesn't require flawlessness or absolute confidence. It offers no ironclad warranties that the outcome will perfectly match your daydreams. The portal demands just one concession: the courage to stop artificially propping up a dead reality, releasing your grip that is the crossing. That is our mission here. If these words are resonating deeply with you, if this message aligns perfectly with the silent frequency you've been holding, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Doing so ensures the next phase of this journey will locate you when it opens. Let's delve into why now is the definitive moment for this transition. This isn't your standard self-improvement chatter about personal growth or leveling up. This is a highly targeted broadcast meant for a distinct collective currently gathered at this exact metaphysical precipice. If you are listening to this, you belong to that collective. The true dilemma isn't whether you are meant to be here. It's whether you have the bravery to admit to yourself that you are. Throughout the development of both personal and global awareness, there are specific junctures where elements synchronize so intensely that stepping forward ceases to be an option and becomes a mandate. The tension building on both sides of the barrier hits an unsustainable climax. The system simply cannot maintain the suspended animation of multiple realities. It is forced to lock into a single truth. These tipping points aren't accidental. They don't happen on a predictable, even schedule. They group together. They wash over us in massive tides. And in this very second, within this exact era of human existence and shared spiritual frequency, a massive tide is swelling. You can sense it. You have been sensing it all along. There is an undeniable feeling that a colossal transformation is occurring not merely within your private universe, but across the broader collective spectrum. You can sense that traditional paradigms, the ancient narratives, and the established systems we use to navigate our existence are steadily unraveling. They aren't exploding into madness. Rather, they are melting away to reveal a purer reality. It's a foundational truth that has always existed beneath generations of conditioning, inherited beliefs, and societal assumptions. We are not witnessing the apocalypse. We are simply watching the expiration of one particular epoch. It is the dismantling of a paradigm constructed on a wavelength that has now lost its dominance. Those who are inherently attuned to these energetic vibrations, the individuals who have forever recognized the dissonance between society's facade and the deeper cosmic reality, are bearing the brunt of the metamorphosis. These intuitive souls are currently gathering at the threshold in unprecedented volumes. They are absorbing the shockwaves of this dissolution with intense severity. This is not a symptom of psychological fragility. On the contrary, it proves they possess the exact, finely tuned instrumentation required to register the shift. If you've spent your life harboring a suspicion that you were designed for an indescribable purpose, if you've carried an internal vastness that defies conventional labels, if, beneath your daily masks and societal masquerades, you've quietly hummed a tune totally foreign to the mainstream noise, then your current experience is simply that quiet hum, erupting into a deafening roar. The quantum limbo is terminating. The portal stands ajar, and it hasn't swung open simply because you meditated enough, read the right books, or gathered enough spiritual gold stars. The threshold doesn't care about a cosmic resume. It responds solely to resonance. Your core vibration, the raw, unfiltered essence buried beneath years of compromise, has finally pulsed with enough clarity and persistence to trigger the lock. The entrance identified your signal. It synchronized. It unlocked. You didn't fabricate this opportunity. You naturally navigated to it. Now, the singular dilemma is whether you possess the courage to walk through. We must address the steep toll of lingering at the entrance. We frequently trick ourselves with narratives about patience, caution, and waiting for the perfect moment of readiness. This logic masquerades beautifully as prudence. It feels safe and mature. Yet, when facing a quantum transition, stalling is never wise. It is, in fact, the most draining decision you could possibly make. Sustaining a state of superposition requires a staggering volume of fuel. Balancing contradictory realities at once isn't a passive, effortless existence. It is aggressively exhausting. As you prolong this state of suspended animation, especially after the environment is primed for collapse, the door is open, and the vibrational lock is picked. You hemorrhage vital life force. Power that should be fueling your next chapter is instead being frantically burned just to prop up a decaying past. In practical human terms, this chronic delay manifests as profound, inexplicable burnout. It's the sensation of sprinting on a treadmill, exerting maximum effort, but remaining entirely stagnant. It's the agonizing realization that transformation is vital, yet lacking the blueprint to execute it. It's a silent mourning over an existence that appears flawless on paper but feels entirely vacant in your chest. It is the suffocating burden of carrying a watered-down persona, knowing it's a lie, yet wearing it anyway because the unknown is too terrifying. That heaviness isn't a symptom of personal failure or psychological frailty. It is literal quantum physics applied to the soul. It represents the brutal tax levied on those who straddle two worlds when the universe is begging for singularity. And with every passing second you delay, the tax increases. Eventually, a critical juncture arrives, a harsh reality that most motivational rhetoric dances around. The doorway will begin to shut. The cosmos isn't penalizing your indecision, nor are you failing a divine exam. The closure happens simply because the energetic environment is constantly in flux. The vibrational alignment that unlatched the portal isn't frozen in time. It is fluid. Should you slip back into obsolete habits, revert to your outdated persona, and broadcast your former signal, the synchronization shatters. The door slams. Unlocking it again will demand an entirely fresh alignment, forcing you to undergo a new, usually far more agonizing journey just to crawl back to this exact ledge. This isn't an intimidation tactic. It is the unyielding law of spiritual physics. This is exactly why the message you are currently absorbing is steeped in genuine urgency. It isn't the artificial pressure of a marketer trying to close a deal. It is the raw, authentic urgency of a guide who has already traversed the doorway. Someone standing firmly on the newly solidified ground, looking back at the brief window of opportunity currently available to you. Having paid the agonizing toll required to make the journey, they are reaching a hand back through the void to insist, move now. Do not wait for tomorrow. Do not wait for a false sense of readiness. Do not wait for perfect weather. The portal is unsealed in this exact second. This is your moment of transition. Consider the journey of a woman named Alara. From an outside perspective, Alara had constructed a masterpiece of a life. She held a prestigious, high-status career. She was anchored in a stable, predictable romantic partnership. Her social calendar was vibrant and meticulously managed, and her daily habits were a model of sheer efficiency. She had dutifully checked every box on the blueprint society had handed her. She navigated life's roadmap with brilliance, diligence, and sincere commitment. Then, somewhere during her 37th year, she awoke one dawn and simply knew. It didn't arrive violently. There was no theatrical breakdown or explosive inciting incident. It was merely a silent, heavy realization that settled into her bones during that liminal space between dreaming and waking, right before she put on her daily mask. She realized, with absolute certainty, that she had been flawlessly executing someone else's script. Her impressive profession wasn't a true passion. It was a subconscious echo of her parents' anxieties about financial security, absorbed so deeply during childhood that it masqueraded as her own ambition. Her relationship wasn't vibrating at her current soul's frequency. It was perfectly aligned only with the naive, heavily restricted version of herself. She had been years prior before she truly understood the depth of her own spirit. Her sprawling social network consisted almost exclusively of individuals who loved the character she played. If they ever met the woman hiding underneath, they would have been shocked and likely defensive. Ultimately, her hyper-productive routine was nothing more than an elaborate coping mechanism designed to numb the agonizing void between the reality she inhabited and the destiny struggling to take breath. She had meticulously crafted a gorgeous, high-functioning, socially approved cage. On that pivotal morning, Upon recognizing her captivity, Ilara did exactly what the vast majority of people do at the precipice. She hit the snooze button on her soul. Not literally, she dragged herself out of bed, brewed her espresso, tackled her to-do list, and played her part flawlessly. But mentally, she locked that profound epiphany in a dark box. She rationalized it as a passing funk, a temporary bout of midlife blues that everyone endures and that fades away if ignored. But it refused to fade. Over the ensuing months, it amplified. The internal alarm grew deafening. The chasm separating her public facade from her private reality became agonizingly difficult to bridge. The sheer willpower needed to sustain the quantum superposition, the exhausting act of simultaneously fueling her fabricated life and harboring her emerging truth, became an impossible burden. Her usual sedatives, hustle culture, stacking up achievements, endless socializing, and obsessive future planning lost their efficacy. The internal broadcast pierced through the noise. Later, she would describe the sensation as a hidden radio transmitter permanently switched on inside her chest, impossible to unplug. It was a persistent, underlying vibration. It wasn't outright agony, but it was relentlessly demanding. And ironically, the harder she fought to suppress, negotiate, or compartmentalize it, the more fiercely it roared. Ilara was directly confronting the portal. She had finally reached a critical juncture her soul had been navigating toward for years, possibly for her entire life, or perhaps for eons across multiple existences. The cosmic variables had locked into place. Her internal vibration matched the lock. The barrier swung wide, and she stood on the edge, absorbing the terrifying symptoms of the approach. The crumbling of everything safe, the profound mourning for a life that was dying, and the paralyzing dread of the unseen future. Most jarring of all was the bizarre awareness that she was fundamentally no longer the woman who had gone to sleep the night before, even though her external reality remained completely untouched. When an artificially constructed identity begins to shatter, this is exactly how it feels from the inside. Initially, it does not resemble freedom. It mimics devastation. It feels like the floorboards are evaporating into thin air. It manifests as a deep, crushing sorrow that lacks a specific target. This is because you aren't mourning a bad breakup or a lost job. You are attending the funeral of your entire psychological framework. You are witnessing the death of your survival strategy. The ego, which painstakingly erected that framework and fiercely defended it for decades, will not yield without a brutal fight. Your intellect will generate brilliant, logical excuses for why you must delay. It will argue that you need more time, that the doorway might be a mirage, or that your symptoms are merely stress or fatigue. Ilara entertained those logical lies for 8 grueling months. 8 months trapped in superposition. 8 months of attempting to inhabit 2 incompatible realities simultaneously. 8 months of bone-deep fatigue, a gnawing emptiness, and the escalating horror that her daily performance was becoming unsustainable. Then, on a completely random afternoon, devoid of any cinematic flair or dramatic external trigger, she surrendered. She didn't deliver a grand monologue, draft a resolution, or chart a new 5-year plan. She simply exhaled and ceased pouring energy into her obsolete life. She stopped battling the internal alarm. She quit trying to mute her soul's frequency. She abandoned the suffocating costume that no longer fit, allowed it to disintegrate into dust, and took the final step forward. She crossed the threshold, and what awaited Ilara across that boundary was nothing like the catastrophes her anxiety had predicted. It wasn't absolute ruin. Her carefully constructed world didn't implode into rubble. She didn't lose the individuals she genuinely cherished, nor did her hard-earned talents vanish. The pure, authentic goodness that existed in her previous chapter remained fully intact. What she actually encountered on the other side was profound, electrifying lucidity. It was a sharp, crystalline clarity she hadn't tasted since childhood, long before society demanded she translate her soul, before the theatrical performance began, and before she was forced into a state of quantum superposition. She finally met herself. She didn't become some mystical, flawless deity hovering gracefully above mundane struggles. She became the raw, genuine Ilara. She reconnected with the exact essence that had been buried beneath years of armor, the very source of that relentless internal broadcast she had fought so desperately to silence. The instant she surrendered, the second she allowed her inner voice to exist without censorship and finally stepped across the precipice, that demanding signal stopped being a nuisance. Instead, it became the foundational frequency of her entirely new existence. Naturally, the external architecture of her life began to evolve. It didn't happen in a single, cinematic explosion of change. Rather, it unfolded with steady, unstoppable momentum, precisely the way a new vibrational pitch forces the surrounding matter to reorganize itself. Her professional trajectory pivoted. Her romantic relationship either found genuine, profound roots or concluded with mutual grace. Her social circles naturally purged the superficial connections, replacing them with individuals who resonated with her unfiltered truth rather than her practiced persona. Even her daily schedule morphed into a supportive rhythm that nourished her actual life, instead of serving as a shield against it. Was the process entirely painless? No. True transformation never is. The disintegration of an old identity is brutal. The sorrow is palpable. The dizziness of the unknown is severe. Yet, the agony experienced after the crossing is fundamentally different from the slow torture of superposition. The discomfort of transformation is the ache of authentic, forward-moving growth. It is finite, it progresses, and it eventually heals into something beautiful. Conversely, the torment of lingering in superposition is the agony of absolute stagnation. It is a lifeless, endless, stagnant pressure that merely builds upon itself with no relief. If Ilara were speaking with you directly, she would confess that those 8 months paralyzed at the threshold were infinitely more agonizing than the leap itself. The dread of her identity shattering was far worse than the actual collapse. The terrifying illusions her mind conjured about the other side were infinitely more brutal than the reality she found. She would tell you that once you finally muster the courage to step through, you realize the doorway was perfectly contoured to fit the exact shape of your soul. In this exact moment, you are Ilara. Perhaps the specific details of your life differ, but the core architecture of your struggle is identical. You are frozen before a doorway that has been attempting to unlock for quite some time. You have been vibrating with an internal signal that refuses to be muted. You are facing the undeniable reality that juggling your contradictory lives is no longer sustainable. You are drowning in the exhaustion of forcing two incompatible timelines to coexist, long after the universe has demanded a choice. The true dilemma isn't if you will cross, it's whether you will seize this fleeting window of opportunity while the portal is unlatched, or if you will condemn yourself to pacing the transitional hallway for years to come. Both are distinct decisions, but only one propels you forward. Drop a comment below and share. Have you ever experienced a definitive point of no return? A singular instant where reality snapped into a new alignment? When you stood on the precipice of the unknown and finally chose to leap, how did that exact second feel in your core? Now, we shift from theory into action. This transmission isn't meant to simply fill your head with philosophical concepts. Grasping the mechanics of the threshold is fundamentally different from actually crossing it. You can intellectualize this quantum analogy flawlessly and still remain paralyzed at the starting line until the end of your days. Making the leap demands more than mere intellectual consent. It requires a highly specific, deliberate act of consciousness. It necessitates a distinct flavor of surrender that has nothing to do with simply agreeing with a concept or believing in an idea. It is the absolute, unflinching willingness to let the old paradigm die. The following exercise is a practical, energetic threshold crossing. Do not confuse this with a standard relaxation technique or a typical mindfulness meditation. It is an active transition. You will step into this visualization as one entity and step out as another. To be exact, you will begin this practice as the version of you desperately clutching the dying past, and you will conclude it as the version that has finally opened its hands. Find a posture that is completely relaxed but highly attentive. Do not lie down. Your physical vessel must remain vigilant for this work. A seated position is optimal. Plant your feet firmly on the ground if you can. Keep your spine comfortably straight. Let your hands rest softly in your lap or on your legs, palms facing the ceiling. This represents a stance of absolute receptivity, devoid of all defensive armor. Gently shut your eyes. Draw in 3 deep, deliberate breaths. Do not fake this. Do not merely go through the motions. Take authentic, intentional breaths. Feel the oxygen flood in. Expand your chest and deeply release. Complete 3 cycles. Now, focus your mental energy on the heavy burden you have been lugging around. You know exactly what it is. You don't need a clever label for it, and you don't need to dissect it logically. Simply direct your attention to the sheer density and exhaustion of carrying it. Focus your mind on that specific exhaustion, the profound fatigue that a full night's rest simply cannot cure. Bring your attention to whatever has been draining the color from your routine, making your everyday existence feel completely empty. Tune into that internal alarm relentlessly demanding a massive shift. Simply allow this sensation to occupy your mental space. Do not attempt to dissect it, and resist the urge to immediately fix it. Just sit with it, and let its presence be formally recognized. Truly experience its heaviness. This step is absolutely crucial. Do not hurry through this discomfort, because that gravity is very real. It is the literal, energetic tax of living in quantum superposition. That immense pressure is the physical manifestation of forcing your body to sustain 2 conflicting realities at once. Sit with that burden without fighting it off or judging yourself. Simply acknowledge, this is the massive load I have been dragging along. Next, visualize a doorway directly in your path. It doesn't require a rigid or logical shape. Allow your inner eye to construct it organically. You might envision a traditional archway, perhaps forged from iron, intricately carved wood, or made of pure, blinding luminescence. Others might picture a simple glowing line drawn on the floor, cleanly dividing 2 spaces. You could even see a shimmering, liquid barrier, similar to gazing up at the surface of a pool from the bottom. Or you might not see anything visual at all, instead sensing a distinct drop in atmospheric pressure or a shift in the room's energetic temperature. However, this portal manifests for you. Simply accept it. Realize that you are stationed right at its edge. Observe your current location. This is your familiar turf. It is the domain of your burdens, the defensive mask you've been wearing, and the predictable narrative you've been acting out. Examine it with absolute clarity without contempt or a desperate urge to flee. Just observe. This is the landscape you've successfully navigated. This is the vibration that has served as your temporary shelter. Now peer through the opening. The landscape beyond is not a fairy tale. It isn't a flawless utopia magically immune to hardship, friction, or conflict. Yet, it differs in one vital, specific aspect. That crushing weight you just acknowledged does not exist over there. Not because your external problems have vanished into thin air, but because the baseline resonance you will use to tackle them has fundamentally transformed. In that new territory, you are no longer balancing dual realities. The superposition has finally shattered. You are absolute. You are unified. You have solidified into the most authentic, unfiltered expression of your core essence. Try to sense the contrast between these 2 environments. Don't just intellectualize it, feel it deeply within your physical frame. Contrast your current standing heavy, strained by the split realities, drained from the endless masquerade against the realm just 1 step away, which vibrates with razor-sharp definition, and the thrilling electricity of being unapologetically you. The threshold is the exact boundary separating these 2 visceral experiences. Here is the moment of transition. It isn't a theatrical jump, nor does it require you to violently torch your entire past. It is merely a subtle, deliberate internal pivot. It is the act of dropping the obsolete state. It is the conscious decision to stop fueling the superposition. It means unclenching your fists from the false identity, the fabricated storyline, and the inauthentic vibration that was never completely yours. Drop it. Do not force it or make a dramatic scene. Just exhale deeply. And on that outward breath, completely loosen your grip on the past. Stop obsessing over what will fill the void. Abandon the need to micromanage your future on the other side. Just let go of the reins. Allow the outdated resonance to evaporate. Stop actively propping up a ghost of who you used to be. And simply walk forward. Take one single step. This portal doesn't demand a sprinting start. It asks only for a single stride of pure willingness. The readiness to inhabit the destination rather than the waiting room. The courage to be solidified rather than fragmented. The choice to become absolute instead of remaining in limbo. Make that movement and observe your body's reaction. You might notice a sudden drop in internal pressure, as if a tightly coiled spring has finally been given room to expand. You could be washed over by intense emotions, a rushing blend of sorrow and intense relief hitting you all at once. This is entirely appropriate. The death of your old reality warrants genuine mourning, even as you celebrate your arrival. Others experience an abrupt serenity, a profound silence that isn't void, but rather brimming with heavy presence. Perhaps the rhythm and texture of your breathing alters, as if the oxygen in this new dimension is purer than the air in the hallway. Whatever physical or emotional response arises, it is perfectly correct. Anchor yourself here for a moment on this new side. Give your consciousness a chance to recalibrate to these new coordinates. You are fundamentally no longer in the same space you were when you began this practice. A genuine transformation has occurred. This isn't imaginary, and it isn't you just pretending to evolve. It is a literal, permanent migration of your personal frequency. This is who you truly are. You are not the heavy burden, the quantum fragmentation, or the exhausting performance. You are the pure, vibrant clarity thriving on this side of the gate. This vibration is the authentic hum you have been continuously transmitting beneath the static of your daily life. It is the exact pitch the portal detected. This is the iteration of your spirit the threshold has been anticipating. Take 3 more intentional breaths in this new space. Make them deep and genuine. Let each exhalation plant your feet more solidly into the ground of this newly claimed territory. Whenever you feel fully anchored, slowly open your eyes. Welcome to your new reality. Let us dissect exactly what alters in the aftermath of this transition. This is the precise juncture where the majority of teachings regarding spiritual evolution, ego, death, and personal awakening dissolve into vague platitudes. They outline the agony of the approach with striking accuracy. But when describing the aftermath, they resort to poetic metaphors completely devoid of substance. This lack of concrete detail is essentially its own form of fear, a hesitation to make firm declarations about the tangible results of transformation. This guide will not make that mistake. Here is exactly what mutates once you breach the boundary. Understand that these are not guarantees of instantaneous external miracles. The physical world doesn't magically contort to your desires the moment you cross. Rather, these are the shifts that occur within your fundamental operational frequency, the core energy from which you interact with existence. And because your internal resonance dictates how external reality organizes itself around you, these inner adjustments will eventually forge highly visible, physical consequences. The initial transformation occurs within the texture of your life force. Prior to crossing, a massive percentage of your daily energy reserves was squandered on simply managing the superposition. You were burning fuel to prop up a dead persona while simultaneously choking out the vibrant soul trying to surface. Managing this internal civil war is an astronomically expensive drain on your system, and it largely happens outside of your conscious view. You rarely recognize this drainage as an active choice. Instead, it manifests as a chronic, incurable lethargy. It feels like you are grinding yourself to dust but spinning your wheels. It's the nagging sensation of being perpetually behind schedule, chronically malnourished in spirit, and constantly falling just short of what life demands. The moment the superposition collapses when the outdated facade is dropped, and your true singularity hardens, that massive block of energy is immediately liberated. It doesn't flood back like a jolt of lightning, but gradually and surely, you will realize the bone-deep weariness has evaporated. The exhausting labor of pretending is over, You will suddenly have access to a completely different caliber of vitality, purer, infinitely more sustainable, and undeniably your own. The second shift occurs in the resolution of your perspective. When you are trapped in dual states playing the actor while hiding the authentic self, your entire worldview is heavily filtered through the friction between those two identities. You observe reality through the lens of profound cognitive dissonance, and that lens severely warps everything it touches. It makes everyday life feel hollow and meaningless. It makes your most comfortable routines feel utterly alien. Most notably, it paints the future with a very specific shade of paralyzing anxiety, simply because you are trying to plan a future without knowing which version of you will actually be there to experience it. Once you cross the threshold, the lens is swapped. Your external environment hasn't physically changed yet, but the sensory apparatus you use to interpret it has been upgraded. You begin to perceive reality with the sharp, unified focus of a singular, coherent broadcast, rather than the chaotic static of two warring stations. And what you observe through this newly polished lens is starkly different. It isn't a flawless paradise, and it certainly isn't devoid of hardship, but it is genuine. It is vivid, grounded, undeniably present, and unconditionally yours. The third transformation takes place within the fabric of your connections. This is arguably the most terrifying prospect for those approaching the threshold, yet it frequently becomes the most beautifully surprising outcome once they arrive. The universal dread is that stepping into authenticity will incinerate all the bonds forged by your former self. The honest truth is, yes, some dynamics will radically alter. Certain connections will naturally reach their expiration date. This doesn't happen because crossing the portal turns you into a cold, apathetic monster. It happens because those specific bonds were anchored entirely to the artificial frequency of your mask. When that frequency vanishes, the relationship will either evolve and take real root, or it will shatter, exposing the painful truth that the connection was always based on the performance rather than the person. However, the fear completely ignores the upside. The bonds that weather this transition, the ones that grow deeper instead of snapping, evolve into something previously impossible. They become unconditionally real. They are now rooted in your genuine wavelength instead of a theatrical script. Furthermore, a fresh wave of connections will emerge. You will begin to attract individuals whose own frequencies harmonize with the new, raw signal you are emitting. You will find people who immediately recognize the core of your spirit, eliminating the need for translation. You will meet those who greet you warmly on this new shore, rather than begging you to return to the shadows. The fourth shift manifests in your internal compass and sense of purpose. Before making the leap, your trajectory is totally obscured by the quantum fog of superposition. You are incapable of sensing your true north because you aren't firmly planted in your true identity. Your transmission is scrambled. Your internal resonance is a jumbled hybrid, and accurate navigation demands absolute clarity. A compass caught between two warring magnetic poles simply cannot find true north. However, the instant you step across the boundary, the static clears. With that newfound clarity comes an undeniable sense of direction. This doesn't manifest as an exhaustive, step-by-step itinerary with guaranteed outcomes. Instead, it arrives as a distinct vibration. It's an intuitive, magnetic pull urging you towards something rather than demanding you flee from something. It's an immediate, bodily knowing bypassing logic entirely that confirms a specific path, connection, career, or lifestyle is vibrating in perfect harmony with your authentic core, rather than your artificial mask. This exact sensation is what humanity is attempting to describe when they use the word purpose. True purpose isn't a prestigious job title, a rigid 5-year plan, or a divine mandate handed down from the cosmos. Purpose is merely a frequency. It is the resonance of being unconditionally, singularly yourself, and allowing that unburdened self to gravitate naturally toward whatever calls to it. That specific frequency only unlocks once you breach the threshold. It is mathematically impossible to access it while pacing the corridor. The fifth and perhaps most profound transformation is the complete rewiring of your relationship with the unknown. Before the transition, Uncertainty is the ultimate villain. It is the paralyzing force that chains you to the starting line. The ego, desperately trying to maintain the illusion of superposition, is petrified of the unknown because uncertainty threatens the survival of the outdated paradigm. The mind spirals into panic. What if moving forward costs me everything? What if the destination is a nightmare? What if my intuition is completely flawed? What if the portal is a trap? Post-crossing, uncertainty wears a completely different face. It doesn't suddenly become cozy, nor does the feeling vanish entirely, but your reaction to it fundamentally shifts. Once you are firmly planted on the new side, you stop weaponizing the unknown as an excuse to remain stagnant. You are now operating from a unified, solidified frequency rather than a fragmented one. From this grounded posture, the unpredictable ceases to be a lethal threat to your foundation. Instead, it simply becomes the natural, atmospheric condition of an expanding, dynamic spirit. The unknown becomes the fertile soil where your next doorway will eventually materialize. It is no longer a math problem you must solve before taking a step. It is simply the texture of the road you are walking on. These are the tangible realities of the transition. This is the authentic landscape of the other side. It is far from flawless, it isn't completely smooth, and it doesn't grant immunity from sorrow or obstacles, but it is genuine. It is absolute, and it belongs entirely to you. That alone is infinitely more valuable than the scraps the old world was offering. Now, we must zoom out and examine the macroscopic implications of this transition. Because your personal leap is not an isolated event, there is a profound logic behind who is currently gathered at this specific precipice. There is a cosmic reason why this portal is revealing itself to this distinct collective at this exact moment in history, carrying this specific flavor of urgency. It is neither a chaotic accident nor a purely selfish endeavor. The expansion of awareness has never been a solitary mission. Individual breakthroughs and societal tipping points are not isolated events. They are the exact same mechanics operating on different scales. When a single human steps through their personal doorway, their baseline frequency permanently alters. Consequently, the immediate environment surrounding them must adapt. Their social circles, their professional ecosystems, the very fabric of their daily reality, everything begins to mold itself to fit this new vibration. It doesn't explode into a new shape overnight, but the reorganization is absolute and unstoppable. And when a critical mass of individuals executes this transition simultaneously, when enough personal frequencies harmonize on the exact same upgraded signal, the macrocosm itself is forced across a threshold. The global superposition shatters. The collective reality is compelled to reorganize around this elevated resonance. This is the exact coordinate we occupy right now. This is the colossal, global gateway that your private portal is directly feeding into. You aren't just leaping to save yourself. You are an active particle in a massive wave. You are part of a vanguard whose souls have been silently, stubbornly emitting a truth that directly contradicts the oppressive frequency of the old paradigm. It is a vibration that is vastly more coherent, authentic, and aligned with the true nature of spirit when it isn't suffocated by the dense, accumulated trauma of a world constructed entirely on fear, division, and profound spiritual amnesia. Your individual leap echoes far beyond the walls of your private existence. This isn't because you are magically superior to those around you. It is because your energetic signature is utterly unique. You possess a distinct vibrational frequency that the larger collective ecosystem desperately requires to trigger its own global crossing. The universal portal won't swing open simply because a handful of enlightened gurus command it. It triggers when a sufficient army of everyday individuals, people who simply decide they are done propping up a decaying reality, lock arms and step through the void together. You are a crucial member of that group, and the reality that you are here, vibrating with these exact emotions, standing firmly at the edge of this transition, absorbing this exact message at this exact second, none of it is a coincidence. It is the flawless, mathematical alignment that the gateway demands. It is perfect vibrational synchronization. It is the precise intersection where your private evolution and the global awakening merge into a single doorway. Stepping through one instantly means stepping through both. This is exactly why the urgency pulsing through this message isn't fabricated. It explains why the portal won't wait patiently forever, and why this broadcast is saturated with a heavy emphasis on the now. The pressure isn't here because the leap is effortless, devoid of pain, or free from sacrifice. The urgency exists because the penalty for hesitation, given the current, highly specific alignment of both personal and global energies, is steeper than it has ever been in human history. Conversely, the massive potential waiting on the opposite side, both for your own soul and the collective consciousness, utterly dwarfs whatever scraps of comfort you are clinging to in the hallway. The portal is unlocked. You are standing at the absolute point of no return. Now, we must translate this philosophy into pragmatic action. The transition cannot remain purely an internal phenomenon. It isn't just an energetic adjustment you experience while sitting quietly with your eyes closed. An internal shift is useless unless it collides with tangible, physical movement. This upgraded frequency must bleed into your daily routine and manifest in the actual choices you make. If it doesn't, the transition is aborted. The new reality might solidify in your mind, but without physical action, it has no vessel in the real world, and an ungrounded frequency inevitably fades away into nothing. Therefore, this is your immediate protocol. First, cease all negotiations with the internal alarm. You are intimately familiar with what that signal is. You have felt it pulsing beneath the chaotic noise of your routine for a very long time. It's the exact truth you brushed up against during the visualization. It is the absolute antithesis of the crushing weight you've been carrying. Stop trying to wrangle it into submission. Stop trying to bargain with it. Stop desperately searching for a compromise where you can politely squeeze this massive truth into your current, tiny life without actually having to change anything. This frequency doesn't want a compromise. It demands a full migration. Your second objective is to pinpoint the exact sector of your life where the obsolete reality is being artificially sustained the hardest. Find the specific arena where your daily performance requires the most agonizing effort, where the canyon between your true self and your public mask is the deepest. This is ground zero. This is where the initial breach must occur. You don't need to detonate your entire existence simultaneously. You aren't required to dramatically tear down every single structure built on the old foundation in one sweeping motion. Simply locate that one specific pressure point, the area where the doorway is glaringly obvious and the lies of your old life are the most unbearable, and make one single movement, not a comprehensive 10-year roadmap, not a total overhaul of your identity, just one step. Execute a single action rooted entirely in your new, authentic resonance rather than your rehearsed script. Initiate one honest conversation completely devoid of the usual people-pleasing translations. Make one concrete decision firmly planted on the newly conquered territory, rather than the waiting room. That single, isolated choice is the crossing. That specific action is what locks the new frequency into physical reality. And only from that newly secured vantage point will the subsequent step reveal itself. The threshold is not designed to show you the entire staircase while you are still standing at the bottom. It only illuminates the very next foothold, then the next, then the one after that. This isn't a glitch in the cosmic matrix. It is the fundamental architecture of the universe. Spiritual evolution operates strictly through threshold events, not through perfectly drafted itineraries. You conquer one doorway, and only then does the subsequent one materialize. The road is forged by the literal act of walking, not by agonizing over the map. Your third imperative is to seek out your fellow travelers. This journey was never intended to be a solitary exile. The momentum of the transition violently multiplies when experienced within a community. The resonance becomes undeniably more potent when it is synchronized with others. The portal physically widens when a collective group marches through it shoulder to shoulder. That is the true purpose of this broadcast. It is not merely content to be mindlessly scrolled past or saved for later. It is a rendezvous coordinate, It serves as a beacon where the specific souls currently lingering at this exact metaphysical precipice can finally lock eyes. It's a space to acknowledge, ah, you are here too. You sense it as well. We are making the leap together. The individuals who feel a profound resonance with the words spoken here today are your tribe at this specific crossing. They aren't your tribe because your resumes match, or because your external lives look identical, or because your specific problems are the same. They are your tribe because they are pacing the exact same hallway. They are tuned into the identical, persistent hum. They are confronting the exact same fundamental choice, regardless of what costume that choice is wearing in their physical lives. Seek them out. Engage with them. Allow your personal transition to be seen, acknowledged, and validated by others. Because the alchemy that occurs when a unified field of people crosses together is vastly superior to the slow grind of isolated effort. The shared vibration echoes and expands. The gateway stretches open. The massive, global awakening becomes achievable in a way that is simply impossible when everyone is privately fighting their battles in the dark, starved of the validation that comes from shared experience. Take a second right now to leave a mark in the comments below. What is the single heaviest burden you are absolutely ready to drop? What is the specific weight you are finally willing to abandon on the old side of the boundary? Declare it publicly right here. Let your intention be witnessed by the collective. Let the energetic field record your decision. You are not alone at this precipice. You never have been. Now, we must address the critical phase of assimilation. Simply crossing the boundary does not conclude the expedition. It merely initiates the next chapter. And embarking on this new chapter brings a unique set of demands, specific daily disciplines, and distinct hurdles that differ vastly from the struggles you faced in the waiting room. The primary hurdle you will encounter during this assimilation is the gravitational pull of the past. This might seem utterly illogical. You finally took the leap. You escaped the cage. Why on earth would you ever consider retreating? The reality is that the ego, the architect of your former identity, doesn't simply evaporate into thin air the instant your frequency upgrades. The ego survives. It vividly remembers all the old routines. It still retains an arsenal of highly logical arguments, attempting to convince you that the previous reality was infinitely more secure, rational, and manageable. Inevitably, there will be moments when your new paradigm feels incredibly wobbly. The upgraded frequency is still solidifying its shape in the physical world, and the tangible circumstances of your life haven't entirely realigned yet. During this turbulent interim, your old mind will eagerly offer to escort you back to the safety of the known. This internal dialogue will masquerade as profound wisdom. It will mimic the voice of a cautious, loving guardian genuinely concerned that you are making reckless mistakes, and in a twisted way, it is attempting to guard you, but it is fiercely protecting a ghost, a version of you that permanently perished during the transition. You must refuse the retreat. You shouldn't refuse simply because backtracking is impossible in a literal sense. You must refuse because, having authentically crossed over, going back doesn't actually return you to the comfort of your old life. That previous reality has entirely imploded. It ceases to exist as a viable option the way it did before your awakening. Attempting to regress would only forge a brand new, agonizing state of superposition. You would be trapping yourself in a much more brutal limbo, because now you possess undeniable, visceral knowledge of what absolute freedom tastes like. The chasm between your rehearsed public facade and your authentic soul would become infinitely more agonizing than it ever was before. Retreat is physically and spiritually impossible. This isn't meant to sound like a punishment. It is simply the physics of spiritual evolution. Once you breach the threshold, your past ceases to be a destination. It is strictly a historical marker. You cannot reverse time or unlearn your truth. Forward is the only available gear. The second major hurdle is maintaining unwavering patience while your physical reality struggles to catch up. The internal shift is instantaneous, a sudden, quantum snap. However, the external restructuring requires linear time. The glaring discrepancy between these two speeds can trick you into believing the transition failed. You might start to doubt the legitimacy of your new frequency. You may feel immense frustration, thus assuming you endured all that spiritual agony for absolutely nothing, simply because your bank account, your zip code, or your relationships haven't magically transformed overnight. This delay is the exact trap where the vast majority of individuals sabotage their own awakening. They don't fail at the doorway, they fail during the integration. They panic when the internal compass has spun entirely, yet the external landscape remains visually unchanged. They doubt the process when their new vibration is blaring loudly, but the physical world hasn't yet scrambled to harmonize with it. You must hold the line. Anchor yourself in the new resonance. Have absolute faith in the impending reorganization. It is already underway. It may not be adhering to your preferred schedule, and it might not manifest in the exact package you daydreamed about. But the shift is actively occurring. Your environment is inevitably bending to accommodate the newly broadcasted signal. Your social circles, financial realities, career trajectories, and daily opportunities are actively restructuring themselves around the upgraded frequency you are emitting. That massive overhaul requires time. It takes exactly as long as it takes. During this lag, your assignment is not to aggressively force external outcomes or frantically manipulate your surroundings. Your sole responsibility is to keep your frequency stubbornly locked in place while the universe completes its remodeling. This is the true art of assimilation. It isn't about hustling harder or forcing miracles. It is about broadcasting your pure signal so continuously, and with such unwavering stability, that physical reality ultimately has no option but to bow to it and reorganize accordingly. The third hurdle of integration involves entirely rewiring your internal navigation system. Before the transition, you were an expert at maneuvering through the old paradigm. You knew the rule book inside and out. You understood exactly which levers to pull, what actions guaranteed safety, and which paths were deemed hazardous by societal standards. In this new dimension, that rulebook is completely obsolete. The topography is entirely foreign, and navigating it demands a completely different set of tools. On this side of the boundary, your primary compass is no longer logical deduction. It isn't calculated strategy, nor is it the obsessive plotting of pros and cons based on the old world's metrics. Your sole compass is now resonance. Resonance is the immediate, visceral sensation of either perfect harmony or jarring friction between a potential choice and your authentic core. It is the deep, bodily intuition which always outpaces the sluggish analytical mind that instantly signals whether a path is vibrating in sync with your truth or drifting away from it. Mastering the use of resonance as your primary GPS is arguably the most vital skill required for post-transition survival. And it is a cultivated skill. It demands serious practice. It requires the sheer audacity to execute major life decisions based solely on a gut feeling of alignment, long before the rational mind has gathered enough data to justify the move. It demands a fierce loyalty to your internal signal, even while your ego frantically tries to run outdated risk assessment models. However, with consistent practice, this intuitive compass will become the most foolproof, reliable instrument you will ever possess. As you rely on this intuitive compass, it naturally fine-tunes itself. The signal sharpens, your inner navigation grows incredibly precise, and you start maneuvering through this unfamiliar landscape with a brand of confidence entirely foreign to your previous life. This isn't the arrogant confidence of possessing a flawless, step-by-step map. It is the grounded assurance of wielding an infallible internal compass. This is the genuine reality of life beyond the threshold. It isn't a frictionless utopia magically wiped clean of hardship, unpredictability, or the inherent complexities of human existence, but it is profoundly real. It is absolute. You are finally propelled by your organic frequency, rather than a rehearsed routine, trusting resonance as your guide instead of bowing to the artificial rules of a counterfeit reality. This exact freedom is what you suffered for. This is what awaited you in the void. and you have finally arrived. Before we conclude this journey, there is a fundamental truth we must collectively acknowledge within this space. What you have absorbed today is not trivial. It is not just another disposable self-help video to be casually consumed, cataloged, and forgotten. It is a literal transition. It is either the definitive leap, the initiation of one, or the profound acceleration of a crossing you had already begun. Transformations of this magnitude demand reverence. They require a witness. They must be treated with the absolute gravity that true quantum transitions dictate. Therefore, pause for a single second before we part ways. Grant yourself a moment of profound acknowledgement. Consider what you carried with you when you first hit play. You arrived burdened by the crushing weight of superposition. You were exhausted from the endless theatrical performance, plagued by an internal alarm that refused to be silenced, and dizzy from staring over the edge of an invisible cliff. You brought all of that heavy baggage here, and you didn't run away. You remained present. You sat through the complex quantum mechanics. You listened to Alara's journey. You participated in the energetic release, and you absorbed the reality of the aftermath. You held the line until the very end. That endurance wasn't a passive act. Simply remaining present is, in itself, a bold movement across the boundary. Your willingness to absorb this transmission completely, allowing it to penetrate your core rather than raising your ego's usual shields, was your first genuine step into the new paradigm. And that willingness holds immense power. It is tangible. It fundamentally matters. You are irrevocably changed from the individual who began this broadcast. A vital internal mechanism has snapped into a new position. Whether the shift feels seismic or subtle, visually apparent or buried deep within your psyche, an authentic pivot has occurred. That pivot is your crossing. It belongs exclusively to you. No external force can confiscate it, and no one can rewind the clock. The portal does not permit U-turns to your obsolete past. You are firmly stationed on the new shoreline. Welcome. Welcome to the absolute lucidity. Welcome to the undeniable definition. Welcome to the vibrant, electrifying reality of broadcasting your true essence rather than playing a part. Welcome to a domain where your gut instinct is your primary GPS, where your life force is no longer drained by maintaining a quantum illusion, where your connections are rooted in absolute authenticity, and where your life's trajectory is driven by genuine purpose rather than inherited anxiety. Welcome to the new dimension you have fought so hard to reach. Now, we address the final directive: what to do with this newfound power. We absolutely do not hoard it. We don't share this simply to fulfill some vague spiritual duty or to be perceived as enlightened. We share it because vibrational frequencies multiply exponentially when broadcasted into the open. The depth of your personal transition solidifies when it is witnessed by others. The newly formed reality anchors itself into the physical world far more aggressively when the signal is blasted outwardly, rather than whispered in secret. Therefore, if this broadcast struck a chord deep within your bones, if it perfectly articulated the bizarre sensations you've been battling, if it finally provided a vocabulary for the invisible ledge you've been teetering on, distribute it. Do not share it as mere content. Transmit it as a beacon. Use it as a flare to help your fellow travelers locate you in the dark. Share it so the invisible doorway suddenly becomes glaringly obvious to those in your orbit who are pacing the exact same hallway, but simply lack the words to describe it. This gateway wasn't forged for you alone. The more souls we can guide through this portal simultaneously, the more dominant and unbreakable this new frequency becomes across the entire global spectrum. If you consider yourself a part of the collective currently gathered at this threshold, make your voice heard. Speak up in the comments below. Engage in the dialogue. Inject your energy into the spaces where your fellow travelers are congregating. Declare exactly what you are leaving behind in the dust. Announce exactly what you are walking toward. Describe what the doorway looks like from your unique vantage point, because your highly specific, individualized perspective of this transition is the exact missing puzzle piece someone else desperately needs. There is another soul standing right beside you, staring at the same portal, but struggling to decipher it. They need your unique translation to finally recognize their own truth and take the leap. We cross together. This isn't a catchy marketing phrase. It is the literal, mechanical requirement of a global quantum shift. Individual vibrations naturally amplify one another. Personal leaps directly fuel the massive collective awakening. Your private doorway is merely one small archway within the colossal, planetary gate that human consciousness is currently surging through. You are an integral component of this wave. Your personal victory is a victory for the entire field, and the extraordinary souls you are destined to meet on this new shoreline, the ones who bravely leaped alongside you, are the architects of the new world. If this broadcast resonated with your soul exactly when you needed it, keep it safe. Revisit these words in quiet moments whenever you face a new boundary and need a visceral reminder of what absolute freedom tastes like. Furthermore, if you know someone currently paralyzed at their own crossroads, someone silently bearing the crushing weight of their own dual realities, send this to them. Do not offer it as casual advice. Offer it as a lifeline. Transmitting this message to a soul standing at their personal doorway does more than simply share a link. You are projecting your stabilized frequency across the void to reach them. You ease their transition by validating their struggle, proving the doorway is real, confirming their symptoms are justified, and showing them they aren't pacing that dark hallway alone. This mutual exchange fortifies both of your auras. It physically widens the portal for everyone involved. Let us conclude our work here. An actual, literal gateway is currently unlatched within your mind. This is not poetic imagery. The precipice you've been marching toward, the transition you've been secretly craving, the persistent hum vibrating beneath the chaotic static of your routine, every single thread has converged at this exact coordinate, at this very second, within this specific broadcast. Your inner turmoil isn't chaos, it is graduation. The fabricated persona you constructed to appease society, survive your environment, and translate your vast soul into digestible pieces has not failed you. It has simply expired. It successfully completed its mission. It transported you to this exact boundary, and now its job is done. The growing pains you feel aren't symptoms of a disease. They are the intense pressure of your genuine spirit cracking open the brittle shell of your performance. Your internal vibration has become an undeniable force. The threshold recognized your authentic pitch and swung open. Your arrival at this message isn't a digital fluke or a lucky algorithm. It is vibrational destiny. Your core frequency synchronized perfectly with the destination, and you walked right up to the ledge. The final dilemma isn't whether the threshold is a mirage, it is absolute, nor whether the destination is a myth, it is waiting, nor whether you possess the strength to leap. You absolutely do. The sole question is if you will seize this fleeting window right now. While the energetic alignment is perfectly primed for the evolution your consciousness has been demanding, retreat is physically impossible. This is a scientific fact, not a scare tactic. The old architecture has been decaying for a long time. Juggling contradictory realities has become agonizingly unsustainable. You have been walking toward this cliff for longer than your human mind comprehends. Now, you are toes to the edge, physically sensing the stark contrast between the heavy past and the liberated future. It only takes a single stride. That is the only toll this crossing demands. One pure act of surrender, one conscious decision to drop the exhausting maintenance of a dead timeline, one deep exhalation that refuses to inhale the toxic past ever again. Take that stride, and you are free. What awaits you isn't some levitating, flawless deity completely detached from human struggles. It is the raw, undeniable, deeply rooted you, the singular entity that has been broadcasting that quiet hum all along, fighting to break the surface across multiple lifetimes. That authentic self isn't a distant fantasy. It is a living reality begging you to unlock the door so it can breathe. Leap now. The pathway is clear. This is the precipice. This is the exact second. The person who pressed play on this video is gone. An entirely new entity is walking away from it. The doorway is now locked safely behind you. Welcome to your new existence. If this specific resonance is still vibrating fiercely through your veins, there is one final piece of the puzzle you must absorb. Go watch the continuation. Once you cross this frequency gate, there is no going back. It dives profoundly into the mechanics of the aftermath, exploring what it means to anchor your new vibration while the physical world frantically remodels itself around you, and uncovering why certain transitions only permanently lock into place once you fully comprehend what you just survived.